And this is part 5 of The Light and Truth of Slavery, Aaron's History, written 1845. This work is the property of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It may be used freely by individuals for research, teaching, and personal use, as long as a statement of availability is included in the text. Pious Slaveholders by Eliza Wright. I have no more disposition than I ever had to demonstrate how much men may dabble with dishonesty or defile themselves with oppression, and yet be saved. How much men may vocally or silently consent with thieves, and yet be honest. How much they may involve themselves with laws and customs worthy of devils, and yet deserve sympathy and consolation at our hands as Christians. There may be Christian pickpockets, Christian horse thieves, Christian swindlers, for aught I know. I am not profound on this argument, but I think such Christians do no honor to a church, much less to a pulpit. On January 15th, 1842, Aaron was traveling through Asenath. I stayed all night at the house of Mr. Nichols, and he entertained me very hospitably. I left his house the next day between 3 and 4 o'clock. You all know the days are very short and cold here at the north. When I left the house, the wind blew very cold, and night come upon me, and I thought I should freeze. I asked 8 or 9 families to entertain me, but I could not get any of them to keep me, and I traveled on. And God opened the heart of a good Samaritan, and she entertained Aaron. And she entertained me like a brother, and her husband was almost 300 miles from home, and not a soul was in the house but her and 4 small children, and yet she was not afraid to entertain the wayfaring Aaron. It was a dreadful, keen, cold night, but the Lord watched over all that dwelt under that roof, and brought us all to behold the light of another beautiful morning. And she refreshed my unworthy body with a first-rate breakfast, fried beefsteak, and good light biscuit. And she gave me a first-rate cup of tea that struck through every nerve, and that was not all she done for Aaron. But she told her oldest son to go out and hitch up the horse. And we got in, and she toted me all the way to Fall River. That is 5 miles she carried me. And she gave Aaron 25 cents in money. She was one white lady out of 1,000. She took Aaron in and kept me from freezing to death. And she gave me first-rate victuals to refresh my unworthy body. Her name I have forgotten, but her face will always be in my presence forever. She is the daughter of the Rav'n Mr. Anderson of Asenath. He has been pastor of the church in Asenath for 40 years. He was a revolutionary. Aaron has formerly been a slave in the South and has seen pretty hard times, and also in the North and in the West. Aaron has been through all the New England states and has told his sorrow and affliction in 32 churches, besides in halls and schoolhouses and dwelling houses. These sorrows and afflictions can be proved by 70,000 men, which the poor slave has to undergo in getting away from the hard taskmasters. Aaron says if the white men were all like Ward Richards in West Bridgewater and Jesse Torrey in North Abington, Mr. Foster in New Hampshire State, who was dragged out of the church in Nashua, Orson Murray in Vermont State, who prints the Vermont Telegraph, Mr. Gay in Hubbardston, Mr. Bradford, who preaches in the Congregational Church in Hubbardston, Mr. Garrison, who was dragged through the streets of Boston with a rope around his neck, Mr. Hanning in Cadiz in Ohio State, Mr. Stansbury in Lancaster, Ohio, Mr. Caleb Swan of Easton. There would not be a slave in the United States, but they are not like these men. Aaron thinks that God has got a crown richly laid up in heaven for these men who has suffered heavy persecution on the right hand and on the left, because they have stood up for the rights and liberties of the poor African man. Who is good enough to stand up and fight for the country in time of trouble, and who have been slain down by hundreds, but are not good enough to enjoy their freedom under these free and independent colors. These free and independent colors float at the Capitol. Aaron says in this free and independent country, there are almost 3 million slaves kept. A lash on the back is valued at 40 cents in Virginia and Illinois. The law, which is common to both states, runs thus. In all cases where free persons are punished by fine, servants shall be punished by whipping after the rate of 20 lashes for every $8, so that no servant shall receive more than 40 lashes at one time, only $16 worth of whipping at one time. The slave Joseph, "Come," said Judah, "and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites." And the rest agreed to it. Then there passed by Midianite merchantmen, slave traders, and they lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. Poor boy. His father had sent him on a kind errand to his brothers, and was waiting for him to return. A Southern gentleman in the debate at Lane Seminary thus describes the punishment of the paddle. A bricklayer, a neighbor of ours, owned a very smart young Negro man who ran away, but was caught. When his master got him home, he stripped him naked, tied him up by his hands in plain sight, in hearing of the academy and the public green, so high that his feet could not touch the ground, then tied them together, and put a long board between his legs to keep him steady. After preparing him in this way, he took a paddle, bored it full of holes, and commenced to beating him with it. He continued it leisurely all day. At night his flesh was literally pounded to jelly. It was 2 weeks before he was able to walk. No one took any notice of it. No one thought any wrong was done. The following instance occurred near Natchez. See NY Evangelist for January 31st, 1835. That's in parens. A planter purchased a notorious runaway. He gave him to understand that he could elope if he chose, probably in a tone which warned him of the consequences. The Negro took him at his word, but was soon taken and flogged very severely. His master then opened the gate and told him to go again. He did so, but was in a few days retaken. His master flogged him, if I recollect, till he fainted, and yoked him in the fence between the rails during the day. The wretched Negro escaped a third time, but was able to elude pursuit only for a few days. This time his master beat him till his back was almost raw, knocked out his eye, teeth, yoked him in the fence, and poured spirits of turpentine over his bleeding wounds. The poor Negro fainted on account of the intensity of his sufferings. My informant received his account from the planter. The two following cases are communicated by Mr. Burney of Kentucky. Not very long ago in Lincoln County, Kentucky, a female slave was sold to a Southern slaver under most afflicting circumstances. She had at her breast an infant boy 3 months old. The slaver did not want the child on any terms. The master sold the mother and retained the child. She was hurried away immediately to the depot at Louisville to be sent down the river to the Southern market. The last news my informant had of her was that she was laying sick in the most miserable condition, her breast having risen, inflamed, and burst. During the winter, At Nashville, a slaver was driving his train of fellow beings down to the landing to put them on board a steamboat bound for New Orleans. A mother among them, having an infant of about 10 months old to carry in her arms, could not keep pace with the rest. The slaver waited till she came up to where he was standing. He snatched it from her arms, and handing it over to a person who stood by, made him a present of it. The mother, bereft in a single moment of her last comfort, was driven on without delay to the boat. On the side of the oppressor was power, but she had no comforter. A man, I did not learn his name, in Scott County, Tennessee, kept a room apart, which no one entered but himself and slaves. One poor man he kept in it 2 or 3 days, going in often and whipping him. No one of the family dared, if they wished, to go to his rescue. His cries and groans were so dreadful that the third night a young lady living there got the key secretly and went to the room. A most appalling sight presented itself to her view. The floor covered with blood and pieces of flesh. She released the almost murdered man. He fled and had not been heard from. The shrieks extorted by this cruel man were often heard on neighboring plantations at midnight, day, dawn, and other times. The Blind Mother. I saw a mother. In her arms, her infant child was sleeping. The mother, while her infant slept, her guardian watch is keeping. Around its little tender form, her snow-white arm was flung, and o'er its little infant head, her bending tresses hung. Sleep sweetly on, my darling babe, my own, my only child. But as she spoke, the infant woke, and on its mother smiled. But oh, no friendly answering smile the mother's visage graced, for she was blind and could not see the infant she embraced. But now he lisped his mother's name, and now the mother pressed her darling, much-loved baby boy onto her widowed breast. But sudden anguish seized her mind. Her voice was sweetly wild. My God, she cried, but grant me sight, 1 hour to see my child, to look upon its cherub face and see its father there. But pardon if the wish be wrong, a widowed mother's prayer. And as she spoke, her anguish grew more loud and yet more wild, and closer to her aching breast she clasped her orphan child. We shall be overrun with them. If ghosts were flesh and blood and flew in flocks, the specters of beggary and crime conjured up by "we shall be overrun with them" would darken all our northern air. This objection, when waged against our measures, implies the conviction that they will be successful. When argued against emancipation, it implies that slaves are kept where they are against their wills. It implies also that those who make it would keep their slaves in their chains, rather than run the risk of having here and there a colored neighbor. If the objector were to see the slaveholder knocking off the chains, throwing away the whip, and giving wages to his laborers, he must needs cry out, "Stop! Stop! If you pay your laborers and treat them well, they will quit you and rush to the north." Who makes this outcry? An American who, while he boasts that his country is an asylum for the oppressed of all nations, would perpetuate the oppression and robbery of his own countrymen, lest some of them should find an asylum in his own neighborhood. But his objection is a bald prophecy, based on no facts, contradicted by history and human nature. If slaves were abolished, the slaves would choose to stay at the South as hired laborers rather than come to the North. Reason 1. They are already there, and the trouble, expense, distance to be traveled, time necessary for journey, and etc. would forever dissuade the main body from migration to the north. 2. There are far more room for them in the slaveholding portions of the U.S. than in the non-slaveholding. In the former, there is one-third more territory and one-third less population than in the latter. 3. The climate of the South is congenial to them, that of the North uncongenial. 4. There is far less prejudice against the colored man there than in the North. 5. They are remarkable for their local attachments. This is one of their peculiarities everywhere. Wherever they are to be found, their aversion to a change of residence, especially to a distant removal, is proverbial. All travelers in Africa unite in this testimony. Edwards' History of the West Indies, Welsh's Sketches of Brazil, Matherson's Notice of Sumatra, Dr. Dickinson's Migration of Slavery, Sturgeon Harvey's West Indies in 1837, Thorne and Kimball's 6 Months in Antigua, Barbados, and Jamaica abound with testimony to this trait. We insert from the latter work a few testimonies of ex-slaveholders in Antigua. The Negroes are not disposed to leave the estates on which they have lived unless they are forced away by bad treatment. H. Armstrong, Esquire. Nothing but bad treatment on the part of planters has ever caused the Negroes to leave the estates on which they were accustomed to live. S. Bourne, Esquire. The Negroes are remarkably attached to their homes. James Howell, Esquire. The Negroes are peculiar for their attachment to their homes. S. Barnard, Esquire. Love of home is very remarkable in the Negroes. It is a passion with them. Dr. Daniels, member of the council. And H. Planter said they have a very strong local attachments. They love their little hut and will endure almost any hardship before they will desert that spot, said. And Aaron says, he has formerly been a slave at the South, is eyewitness to it. Masters Thorne and Kimball say, such are the sentiments of West India planters, expressed in the majority of cases spontaneously and mostly in illustration of other statements. We did not hear a word that implied an opposite sentiment. One gentleman observed that it was very common saying with the Negroes, me never leave me born and ground, i.e., birthplace. The slaves rarely run away from mild masters now. When they become their own masters and are protected by just laws, why should they leave their native region to roam among strangers in a non-congenial clime? Slaves, when emancipated in the South, stay there unless driven out. Farther, he says, the forces were daily increasing, and they felt themselves so strong and secure that they had commenced several plantations on the fertile banks of the Appalachia, which would have yielded them every article of sustenance. Can slaves take care of themselves? In parentheses. And which would consequently, in a short time, have rendered their establishment quite formidable and highly injurious to the neighboring states. Heard ye the wail that was borne on the breeze from the land of the South? It was wafted, where cruel oppression reposeth at case, and liberty's scions are blasted. 'Twas the wail of the black man. He longs to be free from the scourges of oppression that binds him, and he weeps when he thinks of his home o'er the sea and the friends that he left behind him. For once he was free in the land of his birth, till the white man o'er the ocean came sailing, and tore him away from his home and his hearth, while they turned a deaf ear to his wailing. They bound him in chains and dragged him away, and in a dark dungeon confined him, like a felon deprived of the light of the day. With strong iron chains they did bind him. They then hoisted their flag, 'twas the flag of the free, and set sail for their home o'er the billows, and talked with delight of the friends they should see at home 'neath their own native willows. But alas, for the black man, no kind friends await him to greet in the land of the stranger. Oppression and slavery must now be his fate, and no kind hand will shield him from danger. And this in a land where the rich and the poor proudly boast of their free institutions. The scourge of the tyrant he must meekly endure, nor claim for his wrongs restitution. America, boast not thy freedom again, till thou hast crushed the foul head of the demon, till slavery no more shall exist but in name, and thy banners wave o'er none but freemen. Aaron was acquainted with the yellow man that lived in Virginia in the neighborhood where he lived, and the first wife that this man took belonged to his master, and he lived with her about 6 years. Her master then sold her and 2 children to a man who was going to Georgia. He then swore that he never would take another woman that belonged to his master, and then took a woman about 11 miles from where he lived, and they had 3 children. His master whipped him 3 times for going to see his wife and children, and the last time he whipped him, it was the cause of his death. He lived about a week afterwards. When his poor wife got the news, she became crazy and died with grief in about a month, and left 3 little children in the hands of the Arabs to be bought and sold, and perhaps whipped to death as their parents were. Aaron has known several instances beside where slaves have been tied up and whipped to death by their masters. Aaron does not know his age correctly, but supposes he was about 29 or 30 years of age when he left Virginia. And in all his lifetime in the state of Virginia, he has never known but one instance of a slave killing his master. The slave was a man 3/4 white, and his master whipped him severely for gambling. And he took a knife and run his master through the heart. And after he had killed his master, his father-in-law shot the slave down without judge or jury. The circumstance, Aaron says, run through the state of Virginia like lightning. If it had been a white man that killed a black man, there would not have been Ethron or Anthony said about it. This circumstance took place in Virginia 16 or 17 years ago. When Aaron was in Providence, there was a white gentleman took me to a colored woman's house to stay overnight, and I had a long talk to her before I went to bed. And she told me she was acquainted with the rich white gentleman who lived in Providence. And she used to go and wash every Tuesday for that family. And he did not enjoy good health, and in the winter season, he used to go to the South for his health. The 3rd winter he went, he took a colored boy with him to wait upon him. When he came home, he did not bring the boy with him, and when asked concerning the boy, he said the boy died at the South. God spared him to see another winter, and he went to the South again and took another colored boy with him. And when he returned in the spring, no boy came with him. And when asked what had become of the boy, he said he had died, and that the southern climate did not agree with the northern Negroes. A few months afterwards, he was taken sick, and the day before he died, he called to his attendants, "Take away those colored boys! Take away those colored boys!" And the doctor and his friends thought it was the devil he imagined he saw. About a week after he died, the last colored boy he took to the South with him came home. His parents were astonished and rejoiced to see him, and asked why he did not return with the gentleman he went out with. He said the gentleman sold him. His parents were astonished and indignant that gentleman in whom they reposed so much confidence should have been guilty of such an inhumane act, and he had been living. He would have been punished to the full extent of the law. Aaron thinks when the man died, he went right to hell, for the Bible says, "He that stealeth a man and selleth him shall surely be put to death. If he is found in his hands, that thief shall die." When Aaron was in Braintree, he talked there in the Baptist meeting house. While in the house, gentlemen came and shook hands with him and said he was not an abolitionist, but says he, "I pity the poor slave. But one half of the abolitionists are so false, I cannot take side with them." Said he, "I am acquainted with a minister in Braintree who professed to be a warm advocate of anti-slavery and lectured in many of the neighboring towns on the subject. He went to the South and married a woman who owns 160 human beings. He comes back and apologizes for it and says slavery is not so bad as he formerly thought it was. He has found out it is a money-making business. Aaron thinks he is like Lot and Abraham. When they were traveling together, they fell out about their herds of cattle. And Abraham said, I pray thee, let there be no strife between my herd and thy herd. Lot lifted up his eyes and discovered all the plains of Sodom and Gomorrah, and it was well watered and well grassed, but the people were wicked before the eyes of man and before the eyes of the Almighty. But Lot cared more for the good things of this world than for the company of gospel people. Abraham was a man who should with the gospel grace. He was unmovable in the work of the Almighty, and he did not go down there and dwell with those wicked people, but directed his way among the righteous. Our land of the south, like Sodom and Gomorrah, is blessed by nature with all that can add to the comfort of man. But the institution of slavery pollutes the moral and religious character, and those who live in the north, who go down to dwell with them, are but too often corrupted and made partakers in the gain of their unworthy traffic, and all their correct ideas of the rights of our fellow beings disappear before the love of the root of all evil. When Aaron was in Bellingham, I fell in with a white gentleman who appeared to be interested and wanted to have me talk. And said he, come, let us go to the house of the Baptist minister. I went with him to the house of the minister and had a talk with him. And Aaron was very degraded in the minister's eyes with all his Christianity, and the gentleman who accompanied me insisted on my lecturing. He thought I had not sense enough to tell what I had seen all the days of my life concerning slavery. He gave out notice, however, for me to lecture, but took good care to prevent my lecturing in the meeting house, but consented that I should hold forth in the schoolhouse, for I should be laughed at and made game by the parcel of loafers who would gather around. Aaron has lectured in several meeting houses, among which may be named one in Newburyport and one in New Bedford, and in several other places, to large audiences. Aaron thought if he was not good enough to lecture in the meeting house, he would not lecture at all. This clergyman, like a great many others, pretend to remember his brother in bonds, is bound with them. When he does not remember his brother in bonds is bound with him. In Aaron's trouble, he falls among ministers who will entertain him and entertain him very hospitably. That is, if I will stop and attend meeting and hear them preach. And then if I am laughed at and made game of, what do they care? But when Aaron asks them to get up a meeting for him, that draws a damper on their feelings. I do not know what they are afraid of, except that degraded as I am, I may throw some light before the people, so that their congregations may be broken up, so that they will not have $1,500 or $1,600 to put up in their pockets yearly on which to live in fine style, while the poor brethren at the South are in the worst bondage. Aaron thinks if they preach more for money than for the people's poor souls. Haste makes waste, and waste makes want. Let us be certain that we have got the mote out of both our own eyes, and then we can see to pick it out of our brother's eye. Whenever a man is born of God, then he is a new creature in Jesus Christ. In Christ Jesus. Christ has in that white framed a hope of glory, and he is in Christ, and therefore they are as one. God will not bless and convert our souls from sin and iniquity, unknown to us. When God blesses and converts our unworthy souls, we have the witness abide within. Now, brethren and sisters, let us be wise and consistent. Let us remember the sin and iniquity that bounds in our land. When our brethren come to us to get assistance for the foreign mission, we will have our eyes open. Then we can tell him with a clear conscience of the horrors and evil and iniquity that abound in our land. Behold the horrors and sin and iniquity of slavery. Whenever all our hearts are cleansed from sin and inequity, then we can see the horrors and evils of slavery and every wicked, bad sin that abounds in our gospel and Christianized country. Aaron's views on the state of things. Old Beelzebub, the father of sin and iniquity, he tempted me till I like to lose my soul in iniquity. But blessed Michael helped me out of my distress, and armed me with the sword and shield to march for Canaan's land. Sweet fields arrayed in living green, and rivers of delight. No chilling winds nor poisonous breath can reach that happy shore. Glittering crowns and glaring swords will there our armies be. Will sing and shout forevermore around our Father's throne. Here is a short sentence of the wayfaring Aaron. Reader. Here is a short sentence from poor Nat Turner, who suffered almost everything in the swamps for 1 year at Northampton. Finally, he was taken and hung. This took place about 15 years ago. Human flesh, bought and sold and chained together, rank and file, the mastiff is kept to hunt human souls, and this is all done over God's holy word. We have a great many meetings in the southern countries. What good does it do? We are commanded to watch and pray and keep old Lucifer under our feet whenever anyone is pure in the blood of Christ. They do this. The Christians in the South, instead of keeping Lucifer right under their feet, they let Lucifer have his foot right on their necks, and by they'll fall. And great will be their fall, for they will fall to rise no more. This is what the wayfaring Aaron requested me to write for him. When I was in Ohio, about 20 miles from Chillicothe, Aaron and Ben pitched a tent along the Scioto River, and there we remained for 4 days. Aaron goes and gets a pot that they keep in the barn and grease the wagons, and takes it to my little tent and cleans it, and then goes and gets raw potato parings out of the swill and cooks them. One day, Aaron went and got an old shank bone and cooked it. It was a great place for hunting. Aaron went out to gather some chips early in the morning. A hunter came very near shooting Aaron through the head. We were obliged to leave that spot, as it was dangerous for us to tarry there. We didn't put up quarters anywhere till we reached Lancaster. The way we went was 100 miles. After I was in Lancaster 4 years, I got to conversing with Mr. Stansbury. He told Aaron that he had traveled along the Scioto River and told him about my little tent I had built along the Scioto River. And he told me that he saw the same tent, and Aaron thinks it is there to this day. Some days after I left my master, I thought I heard someone following me. It was in a woody, swampy piece of land. I turned my shoes hindside before to make them think I was going the other way, and went about 2 miles into the swamp. And Aaron thinks the Lord looked down upon me and put wisdom in my unworthy head. On the 9th of May, 1844, Aaron was traveling through Spencer in Massachusetts. He fell into the house of so-and-so. They were blank, was hungry, tired, and weary, and asked Mr. for leave to lie down upon his kitchen floor, and understood him, yes. He went in and saw his little daughter, whom he asked to lend him a teapot to make himself some tea. Her mother came and looked cross and savage at him and asked what he wanted. He replied, I wanted to make a little tea. She refused him, and liberty to lie upon the floor, and bid him to be off, a black rascal. He went on, but God opened the heart of a good Samaritan, who would not allow him to make use of his own, but gave him of her tea, and gave him a bed to rest his unworthy body, which the other and his wife had not grace enough in their heart to do. Deuteronomy chapter 15, 1 through 14. At the end of every 7 years thou shalt make a release, and this is the manner of the release. Every creditor that lendeth ought to unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Of a foreigner thou mayest exact it again, but that which is thine with thy brother thine hand shall release, save when there shall be no poor among you. For the Lord shall greatly bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, if only thou carefully hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all these commandments which I commanded thee to this day. For the Lord thy God blesseth thee as he promised thee, and he shall lend unto many nations. But thou shalt not borrow, and thou shalt reign over many nations. Thou shalt not reign over thee. If there be among you a poor man of one of thy brethren within any of thy gates in thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not harden thine heart, nor shut thine hand from thy poor brother, but thou shalt open thine hand wide unto him, and shalt surely lend him sufficient for his need in that which he wanteth. Beware that there be not a thought in thy wicked heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of release, is at hand, and thine eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him not, and he cry unto the Lord against thee, and it be sin unto thee. Thou shalt surely give him, and thine heart shall not be grieved when you givest him unto him, because that for this thing the Lord thy God shall bless thee in all thy works, and all and in all that thou puttest thine hand unto, for the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, and to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land. And if thy brother, an Hebrew man or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee, and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him go free from thee. And when you sendest him out free from thee, thou shalt not let him go away empty. Thou shalt furnish him liberally out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto him. Shall the United States, which cannot bear the bonds of a king, cradle the bondage which a king is abolishing? Shall a republic be less free from the monarchy? Shall we, in the vigor and buoyancy of our manhood, be less energetic and righteousness than a kingdom in its age? C. Stewart. Shall every flap of England's flag proclaim that all around are free, from farthest Indian to each blue crag that beetles o'er the western sea? And shall we scoff at Europe's kings when freedom's fire is dim with us, and round our country's altar clings the damning shade of slavery's curse? Go, let us ask Constantine to loose his grasp on Poland's throat, and beg the Lord of Mahmud's line to spare the struggling Sulio. Will not the scorching answer come from turban, Turk, and fiery Russ? Go loose your fettered slaves at home, then turn and ask the like of us. Whittier. We northern men have to pay taxes for so many head of cattle and so many head of horses, and they own houses. They have to pay taxes for them. And if they own land, they have to pay taxes for that. Now, our white brethren at the south have to pay taxes for these houses and lands, and their horses and cattle, so Aaron says. Aaron says, for their human cattle, they do not pay 1 cent of tax. And for these human cattle, they will sell for $800 to $1,500. So much profit to them, and yet do not pay taxes for them. Aaron says that there was a gentleman in the town of Lynn told him the town of Lynn had lost $1 million by the South. Aaron says there was a gentleman in the town of R told him that the town of R had lost $50,000 or $60,000, and several other towns had lost money by the white brethren in the South. So Aaron says, at Norfolk, there is between 200 and 300 men kept there. What are they kept there for? Why? To keep the blacks in slavery. Our free and independent colors float there at the Capitol. So they do. And Aaron says there is almost 3 million slaves held in bondage under these floating colors. Now, where does the support come from that keeps these soldiers there? Why, pretty much the whole heft comes from the North. You white friends will all unite together instead of rising and shaking the dust off your feet and having nothing to do with the bad tarlums in the South. But Aaron is afraid that you white friends will unite together and will leave you as poor as poverty, as poor as poverty as the poor slave is, before you see the horrors and the evils and the inequity of slavery. Aaron has traveled through 12 different states and 100 miles of Canada, and never was entertained so hospitable in my life as I was by Mr. Ward Richards in West Bridgewater. And if I never see him no more, I pray God I may have grace to meet him in heaven. And I was traveling in South Bridgewater and fell in with a white lady, but I did not learn her name. And I asked her if she would not be good enough to sell me a slice of white bread. And because I called her honey, she got very angry with me. I did not mean any harm by calling her honey, but she had a great deal of southern temper in her, and she is unconscious of everything that's reasonable. She called Aaron a damn black scoundrel and all the names she could think of, and hailed her husband to come away from the lower part of the field. He came running with a hoe and leaped over a fence about 4 feet high, and he hollered, "Ho, ye damn rebel, what have you been doing to my wife, you damn black scoundrel, you?" My answer was as quick as possible. I have been doing nothing, but that did not seem to be of any satisfaction to him, and then I had to spring for a rock as quick as possible, for he would have split me through with the hoe. Aaron was traveling the other side of the Junita River. I fell in a white lady's house and was almost starved to death. She was a tall, slim lady and fair complected, and I asked her for a piece of bread and meat, and she filled my hat full. Aaron thinks she had a fair heart too, for because she done as God commanded her to do. And how is that? To divide with your brethren. And Aaron sat down alongside of the Junita River in the state of Pennsylvania and began to eat out of my hat. Aaron saw a white man come along. "Ha!" says he. "You damn scoundrel, you. Get up and come to me." I got up as soon as I could, but I had no idea of coming to him. I stood and considered, and he told me to lay down my hat and come quick. But I laid for the water as quick as possible, and Aaron came across the water. In some places the water took me up to my neck, and the wind blew very hard and took off my hat. And my bread and good, nice meat with my hat sailed down the river. I considered all that nothing. But the Lord took care of my unworthy life and saved me from drowning. And not only that, but kept my body out of the hands of that Arab. And in the evening, Aaron crawled into a barn, and the Lord took care of my unworthy body in that barn, as well as the king in his palace with his army of soldiers around him. What a blessed thing it is for any poor soul to put their trust in the Lord. The Lord has took care of Aaron through sorrow and affliction. The Lord has delivered me out of the hands of a hard taskmaster. He has blessed me, my unworthy body on free soil, and my face thy onward toward his holy kingdom. Since Aaron has come away from my hard taskmaster, I have fell among sincere Christian people. Sometimes I think I never will have grace to meet these dear, friendly white people in heaven. Know that the day is coming that the slaveholder and the slave has got to stand before the tribunal bar and there render account before holy God, the same as the murderer stretched on the gallows before judges and jurors. When we are brought before a holy God whose judgment is quick and powerful, sharper than the two-edged sword, his judgment is not like man from 30 to 50 years. His judgments are forever. While thousands of years roll around, if we die in the full triumph of holy faith, we'll take a leap right into his holy kingdom, and there we'll live forever. And if we die with our hearts shut with sin and iniquity, we'll go down to hell, and there we'll burn forever. When Aaron was in the town of Kennebunk in the state of Maine, I fell in there with a white friend. He treated Aaron hospitably and got up to meeting for me before I left the place. There was a white gentleman asked me if I knew a man by the name of Ward Richards, a damn scoundrel in West Bridgewater. I told him I knew no such person, but I knew a Christian gentleman by the name of Ward Richards. Do you know what the Bible says? If you don't like your brother, you must not persecute him. Aaron thinks you are as destitute of the Bible and every other good moral principle, or else you would not stand up and persecute your white brother who has done you no harm because he stands up for equal rights for the poor, degraded, downtrodden African man. When Aaron was in Princeton, he fell in a white lady's house, and I got conversing with her about one thing and another, and she told Aaron of a lady about 60 years of age, and she was always very bitter against the anti-slavery cause. They had an anti-slavery meeting in the place. One of the anti-slavery women went and conversed with this old lady, and she got very angry with this anti-slavery woman. She told if 5 cents would free all the slaves in the South, she would not give it. She was knitting as usual about 4 days afterwards when she fell down dead. And some think it was the judgment of the Almighty upon her for her wicked bad doings. Since Aaron has left home, I have traveled through about all the free states. I have been mobbed in a great many places, but thank God I have not had any bones broke. My life has been threatened, but my Heavenly Father has looked down from above and saved my unworthy life. I have been highly threatened to be sent back to my hard taskmaster, old Beelzebub, the father of sin and iniquity. If he had his way, Aaron would have been sent back to his hard taskmaster long ago. Thank God that God is above the devil, and he has kept Aaron's unworthy body out of the hands of his hard taskmaster. This is what the wayfaring Aaron requested me to write, an abolitionist of Leo minister.